Welcome to Deep Pockets, the podcast for exploring how basic science, once created in a lab and funded by public means, is fueling the economy with completely new private industries. Deep Pockets is created by Petra Soderling.
Quantum mechanics is a field of physics that has been studied since the early 19th century. The term quantum mechanics was coined by three German physicists in 1924. Fast forward from quantum mechanics to quantum computing. Quantum computing began in 1980 when American physicist Paul Benioff proposed a quantum mechanical model of the Turing machine, which in turn is the first theoretical model of a computer by English mathematician Alan Turing from 1936. I wanted to start with this intro to highlight that quantum computing has been around for some time, and it's a great example of a technology that has international, publicly funded roots that is now generating profits to private businesses around the world. Or is it? To discuss this with me today is André M. König from Entanglement Capital, a private firm that makes investments into quantum information science ventures. André studied quantum computing at MIT and holds an MBA in economics from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, as well as a master's in business from ICN School of Management. He speaks English, German, and French, so is a perfect representation of the transatlantic landscape we're discussing today. Welcome to Deep Pockets, André.
Thank you so much, Petra. I think every introduction also needs to mention that Einstein thought quantum mechanics to be spooky, and hopefully you and I can bring some order into that quantum mess. It's my pleasure to join Deep Pockets here from South Beach, Florida, where I'm overlooking the Atlantic towards Europe.
Awesome. That sounds very nice. So the reason why I invited you here is because of your experience as an investor, but you run many other quantum-related businesses. So before going into the investment side, can you tell us about the other enterprises you run?
I run three companies, all of them 100% focused on quantum information science, as we call the field, or quantum tech. Entanglement Capital, a tiny little investment fund with the purpose of operating a startup accelerator for growth stage quantum tech companies. And two other companies that kind of feed into my investment activities. Interference Advisors, which I call the Gartner of quantum, hoping that the Gartner is not going to get angry at me for that. But for the last 3 years, we've collected about 30,000 data points on who the vendors, startups, investors, use cases, products, roadmaps, and so forth are within quantum tech globally. And we offer that data as well as analysis and custom insight reports recently for the Department of Defense here in the US to our customers. One Quantum, which is a global community organization in quantum technologies organized by chapters. We have 21 or 22 chapters now, from the mountaintops of Nepal all throughout Africa, Latin America, North America, Europe. We also have a couple topical chapters, Women in Quantum, which holds a bi-yearly conference, the Women in Quantum Summit, which is the second or largest conference in quantum technologies by attendees, but also by engagement, where we reach 150,000 people online over this event. And the goal here is really twofold. Number one, to fight hype. There are a lot of fake experts and wannabe experts in quantum technologies, and as Einstein said, it is spooky. So you really need to be committed and invested into quantum to understand it and bring value. But we welcome everybody who is, and you don't need a PhD from Stanford or Oxford or some other fancy university to be successful in quantum, and that's what we're hoping to do with One Quantum through events, conferences that I mentioned, but a mentoring program that we run with about 400 participants right now, career services and career fairs, as well as ultimately projects. And back to the mountaintops of Nepal, a group of 5 students there just ran the first quantum computing project ever in Nepal and at One Quantum. So we're very excited about that.
Wow, that's pretty breathtaking. Do you sleep?
I don't sleep. You can hear that in my voice. I've been dragging on a cold for the last 3 weeks, but it's a fascinating field. It's a privilege to work in this field. It's still a very small field. I think we'll be talking about the ecosystem later a little bit, at least from a commercial point of view. So it's not easy to make a career out of it, and investments on the investment side obviously are still very small and modest. So, but very exciting, very fast evolving and ever changing, especially in the second half of this year with some big deals and activities. So not much sleep, but we'll do that when we're sitting on the beach one day, hopefully, rather than at the desk here.
Yeah, so let's talk about the beach. So in my intro, I kind of alluded to the fact that are people actually making money? So you do make private investments into quantum ventures. What do you look for when you make these investments? What are the criteria for investing?
So I said that my other two businesses kind of feed into my investment activity, and that is for a very specific reason. One Quantum, our global community organization with thousands of members, you can think of that as a source of deal flow. And deal flow is one of the critical success factors for any investors. How do you get the first look at a company? How do you have credibility, but also reach and exposure to different founders, maybe even before she or he knows that they'll be founding a company because they are still studying or working in a different field. So with One Quantum, we've really been able to build up a fantastic organization that gives us amazing reach, but also really deep insights into global ecosystems, which is amazing for deal flow. Interference Advisor, through the due diligence, the data, the insights, and so forth, allows us to really create benchmarks and facts in an industry that has very few benchmarks and facts, just through the nature of its youth. If you're trying to assess a company in a specific sector or application, then you need something to kind of compare it to, and really validate its baseline. And that's what Interference Advisors allows us to do. Beyond that, we're indeed 100% focused on quantum technologies, which is very unique. I know 2 or 3 other investors globally that have that focus. Other investors are more generic deep tech investors or larger venture capitalist funds. So we do look at that. We do look at specific stages of startups. We do want to help a little bit. I mentioned an accelerator program that we operate, where we hope to help companies that already have a prototype, an MVP, maybe a couple of research partnerships, or even the first customer or two, hone in on their target market, their positioning, their differentiation, and then build up their teams, their sales and marketing processes and collateral to successfully what investors call a demo day at the end of a 3 or 4 months program, be put in front of the lion cage, a big room full of investors hungry for the next deal, and be successful in raising a $15, $20, $25 million follow-on round. So that is our model, and we're very data-driven. We have a number of different assessment frameworks to assess the quantum technology, the technological readiness level, the business maturity of a startup, and many other things. So we try to be as objective as possible in this spooky quantum world.
So if you mainly invest in very early stage startups, like fresh out of the lab, isn't that very risky for you? Is there other ways for you to kind of reduce the risk? I'm thinking of, would you focus on hardware or software or different types of ways of reaching the quantum state?
Unfortunately, I studied economics at the University of Chicago, as you were so kind to mention in your intro. And literally the first thing we learn there is that risk drives the rewards. So That is probably something I've been dragging with me for 20 years now. I don't mind the risk as long as I can control it as much as possible through having this early deal flow and this early sourcing, through having all this data, these frameworks and due diligence concepts that we've established for quantum that are quite unique, and really through having a deep network and understanding of the larger ecosystem and its context. Of course, there are certain applications that might make more sense than others. Hardware for the small fund that I run is really largely out of reach. Maybe I could buy a couple qubits, but not much more. So we are looking mostly at software, at applications, but also at the other fields within quantum information science, like quantum sensing, quantum communications, and quantum encryptions. While those markets might be smaller than the infamous trillion-dollar quantum computing opportunity, they are also more mature with much more specific products, really more certain timelines and roadmaps, and an initial commercial rollout that is really a year or 2 years old already, and thus years ahead of what we see in quantum computing. So through the nature of being a very small investor, we are probably a little less risky by definition, since we're forced to look at deals that we can afford, and these big moonshots is not part of it. If I had 100 million or more to invest, I certainly would love to take that risk as well on one of those big machines.
So I'm no expert, but I've been following this space for about 12, 18 months now. And it seems to me that most startup companies are currently making money by creating equipment that they're selling to public players like universities or countries even. And then you have the super big ones like the Googles, Dewey's Rigettis that are well funded and are building. So do you see the kind of landscape being in the future for the startups to being swallowed by these big companies, or do you see them having their own business long into the future?
At present, I think any investor that invests into quantum computing specifically and expects a liquidity event other than through an exit is fooling her or himself. Commercial revenue is very far out. I can tell you that out of 500 or so startups that we track globally in the space, very, very few have any commercial revenue. And if I say very, very few, 10% might already be too much. And if you peel back the layers of that onion, you discover that most of what's reported as revenue there are grants from federal organizations, universities, and others, and then really in a best case scenario, research partnerships with certain of the large customers. And we've all read about what some of my German friends at Volkswagen BASF are doing, the New York Wall Street banks like Goldman Sachs and JPMC, and some other large Fortune 500 type of companies. They are spending money on this ecosystem, and with IBM, with Rigetti, with some of the startups, but that really is very, very small. On the other hand, and this is a fortuitous week to be having this conversation, IonQ, one of the most famous and well-funded startups that closed a SPAC deal 6 or 8 weeks ago, is ringing the bell in New York just in a few days to have its first IPO and bringing in large amounts of cash that I frankly wonder where will they spend it. Hopefully on me and some of my services, but even I can't write an invoice for 100 million. The quantum universe is still very small. So there's a lot of cash coming in through mergers, through divestitures. We've seen Honeywell spinning off its hardware business and merging with Cambridge Quantum Computing. I think we'll have one or two surprises by one of the large famous names in the space before the snow starts to fall, and not just here in Miami, but in a more temperate climate zone. So a lot of startups that I talk to currently have offers on the table from one of the large vendors or a financial partner to be acquired. I think a lot of these startups are still very skeptical about these offers and feel they are undervalued and are tending to refuse them, which is exciting. So a lot of money in the quantum universe. I don't think it's really figured out yet where to go, but almost no commercial revenue.
That's so fascinating. I think
unless you're IBM and run the IBM cloud, then you're making money. But
yes.
Everybody else, I think, is not at that table.
So we probably have some listeners wondering at this point, what does it do? Why do we need quantum computing? What are the use cases? So I'm thinking that, okay, we have this quantum space, lots of money, lots of companies, but who's the end user? Is it going to be finance, biotech, telecom?
Why do we need it? I think that is the best way to start thinking about it. And if I give you kind of the late evening happy hour type of answer, is because humanity is being faced with a lot of very big challenges, from climate change to personalized health. Universal basic income is being discussed in more and more countries, but also security issues, and increasingly we read about cyber attacks on some of our big companies and even government infrastructure. And these problems, when you dig into them mathematically and computationally, are all problems that lend itself to being solved by a quantum computer, simply through the way that a quantum computer performs a calculation. So it has nothing to do with the speed or the power, the performance of a quantum computer, which is 1,000,000 times more than a supercomputer. But similar to a fighter jet compared to a bicycle, it is not about the speed. It is the physical principle behind it and what you would use it for. And it's these NP-hard versus P-hard problems, optimization problems, factorization problems, Monte Carlo problems that you find in new material research, new drugs, new medication, optimizing financial portfolios, traveling salesmen, kind of logistical problems, be it FedEx and their trucks on the road, or routing of packages in a 5G network, that theoretically we believe we can really solve with this new technology. There's a lot of skepticism out there because we haven't done it yet, and in many times we don't even have the algorithms, the quantum mathematical way of describing these problems to a quantum computer, but that is the hope. Then there are applications in quantum machine learning. A neural net is nothing else but an optimization problem. And there are security implications that I hinted at, since current encryption standards, some make the argument, can easily be broken by a quantum computer. It's a factorization problem from a mathematical point of view. And the big fear that China, or that's rumored to have invested 11 or 12 billion US dollars into a national quantum program already, might potentially crack all of our infrastructure and data, or some other bad actor or hostile hacker could potentially do. So a lot of potential and a lot of maybes and hypotheses. Today we really haven't done anything useful with them yet. It's all experimentation. It's all theoretical gameplay. Everybody firmly believes that we can solve these big problems that we're facing with quantum computing. And if that's the truth, then we're ushering the next industrial era with hopefully a future that resembles a benevolent science fiction movie, and that'd be fantastic. That's why everybody that I know works in this field, but a long road ahead.
So help me understand a little bit still with this technology. If in classical computing, when companies want to create products or new technologies, they create standards, industry specifications. They want to strive towards interoperability of their equipment, so they work together, so everyone can grow the cake bigger and enjoy. But in quantum, you're saying that's not the case. That if one person has a quantum lock and a quantum key for the security, and then another one has the same system, but it's impossible to break the other quantum system, even though both of you are using quantum encryption.
And a lot of people are working on regulation, on ethical and moral standards, on standardizations, on frameworks, even on jurisdiction for quantum computing applications. So all of that work is being done, which is kind of crazy if you think where on the maturity curve quantum is. It really just came out of the big labs, and companies just started to play around with it very, very recently. So I do want to make sure we're sending a positive message out here. This technology is maturing extremely fast. A lot of very smart people in North America, in Europe, but also in all these other corners of the world where we in One Quantum operate, really trying their best to build local ecosystems and collaborations across public-private partnerships with startups, with investors, and so forth. From a pure application point of view, and that is just my personal opinion, I think Elon Musk version 2 one day is going to come along with this all-powerful machine, and hopefully will do something good with it. It is not something that will ever run on your iPhone, even so some people are working on that. But you would need to understand quantum and quantum math, which takes a little bit of work. So I think the application and the cake that you refer to might be very big and not very shared. One person is going to get very fat from eating all that cake, her or himself.
So you mentioned Himalaya. One of the arguments, I think about 20 years ago, when all of the Western world had the internet, but many African countries did not. But then companies started building cellular networks and offering mobile phones in Africa. And there was a conversation that many African countries are actually making a frog leap in using apps and mobile services and going ahead with mobile banking, for example, much faster than Western countries who already had internet and laptops. Do you think that maybe something like this could happen with countries like Himalaya and some of the African countries that you work with, that because they invest in quantum right now, they would have an advance?
It's very difficult, unfortunately. In Nepal, as amazing a job my president, Manish Thapa, of our Nepal chapter job has done, it is still very difficult to get support or response from local key influencers, stakeholders, government, or companies. In Africa, we have 8 chapters from South Africa to Zimbabwe, Ghana, Kenya, up to North Africa. We see a little bit more appetite. We're starting to work with the South African government, for example, to help them formulate their national quantum strategy. We've run large conferences there. We've run hackathons and educational courses for folks. Reality, though, is that these quantum computers, as much progress as we've made in this space, which is really ridiculous if you think about it, just over the last few years, are still extremely, extremely difficult to comprehend, to build, and to bring to market. And the basic science that you need, the sheer understanding of physics, but also math, and then the engineering talent and resources required to put something like this in place, kind of limits it to North America, and both the US and Canada are very big players here. The large European economies, Germany with probably the second largest government program in the world after China. Countries like the Netherlands, the UK, Finland, France, also Spain, that are doing tremendous work. Israel had a very strong kind of entry on the global quantum scene just a year and a half ago, with a very strong and impressive national program and a local ecosystem. Japan, Australia, and then of course China and Russia. Beyond that, it's going to get very difficult to find the talent required, the basic scientists, the engineers, the developers, the mathematicians that you would need to pull something like this off.
So before the recording today, you shared some of your data material with me, and there were two maps that caught my attention. One map is the public investments. You alluded to these government programs around the world. You have many countries who are putting a lot of public money into quantum research and development. So there's US, Canada, China, Russia, the countries that you mentioned. But then the other slide that you have is the private technology startups in this space, and it's pretty much only the US. So other countries are investing in the research, but the startups are not coming up. So why is that? Are the countries are not interested in making money, or what's going on here?
I think nobody has really yet figured out how to make money in quantum, and that is a good thing, because we need to give our scientists and engineers time to continue to mature the technology. Beyond that, I think you see some of those typical geopolitical differences at play. The North American market, where some of the big OEM vendors, IBM, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Intel now too, have gotten into quantum. They, of course, have a bottom line driven mandate. And, IBM is a fantastic, very impressive research organization. And they have given and will continue to give their quantum program a lot of leeway and freedom. At some point in time, the manager of that program, Diego and Jay, they will need to report some good numbers to their CEO, or they'll be in trouble, right? In Europe, we simply haven't reached that stage yet. And in Europe, independent of the application, it's not much different in digital AI or blockchain. We just don't have that same startup culture, but also not the same investment culture. Private investors, you mentioned this map of deals in quantum, and most of the startups indeed are in North America. If you dig deeper into that chart, you will see that there's about 35-40% of the money that does come out of Europe, and it goes to the US, which is a shame. The UK here is a big exception, but unfortunately our British friends left the EU, so those programs are struggling a little bit in itself. It's a question of startup culture and investment culture, but we also don't have these big Google, Facebook, Amazon type of companies anywhere else except maybe China. And companies there like Alibaba are heavily engaged in quantum as well.
You mentioned lack of talent and resources everywhere, so maybe the solution is for these European and other countries to train more quantum professionals.
That is something that every government and every big company is talking about. We in fact just delivered a study on the quantum workforce. The problem here is that you need to train a wide variety of roles. These PhD types of profiles that do the basic research and the science, engineers at a very high level, but then also developers, folks that help with the kind of assembly, measurement, control, and auxiliary systems. So it is an effort that takes years and years and years. In AI, in blockchain, in digital, it might be enough to take a few classes, online certificates, and then learn kind of on the job. In quantum, if you're really talking about building a viable system, it takes years and years and years of training. So we will be seeing a gap, which in the startup world dramatically called the Valley of Death. And it will be very interesting to see who gets through that. It's a problem that can't be fixed with money or anything else. We just need the right people.
Okay, as we approach the end of our time here, do you have any final words to our audiences on quantum?
I think everybody, even if they don't feel concerned by anything that we just discussed, should at least invest half an hour or so of their time into Googling quantum computing and watching some videos. We'll close with Einstein. It is spooky indeed. Theoretically, it also makes things like time travel or teleportation possible. So it is a fascinating field, and everybody will probably enjoy learning about things like superposition, entanglement, interference, because they truly are fascinating. To all my professional friends out there in the quantum world, we gotta keep at it. We have to be positive. We have to avoid hype. Hype is what's killing us. Hype with customers, hype with partners, hype with investors. We need to give it the time to be successful, to mature, figure out the problems that we still have, and then really bring it to market.
André M. König from Entanglement Capital, thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure.
You've listened to Deep Pockets by Petra Soderling. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes.